I think India is a good market. All of India's energy sources, electric power that India generates, came from hydro or nuclear. But if we are still using coal-fired plants to produce electricity, then we really haven't solved any problem other than at the surface. You cannot solve a problem at the surface. You've got to solve the problem at the engine level. You can't just take a car, paint it, and say it's a new car if it has an old engine.
Welcome, viewers. Let's break some more boundaries with Sabir Bhatia. And this time, we'll talk about this huge new revolution of electric vehicles, EVs, virtually taken the world by storm, especially India. 157% year-on-year growth in the last 2 years is quite amazing. So Sabeer, what's this EVs, and how did Elon Musk come up with this idea of EVs? You know Elon Musk, you've spoken with him, so tell us something about EVs.
Yeah, I mean, I've known him since his internet days of the 1990s, late 1990s. So at that time, Elon had just started SpaceX, and they were using electric motors and rockets to shoot missiles, to shoot rockets into space. And he probably came up with the idea of miniaturizing a battery-powered motor and putting it in a vehicle. And I think the whole EV revolution started in about the year 2003, 2004. But for the longest time, they took a whole bank of lithium-ion batteries, which are used in all of the laptops and all of the electronics we use. And then he put a motor to drive, the drivetrain and to drive the four wheels in a car. So if you really conceptually think about, what an electric vehicle is, it's just a battery and a drivetrain and a motor that drives the drivetrain. But if you start adding electronics to it and start thinking of electric vehicles in a different light, it's actually a computer on wheels, because it's collecting data as it goes along, and it uses this data to drive forward the whole autonomous car revolution, self-driving cars. One is, of course, the whole, the benefits of electric vehicles, which have, better tailpipe emissions. But in a nutshell, it replaces a gasoline-powered engine with an electric motor that is driven by batteries that are rechargeable, much like the way laptops work. And by doing this, what he was able to do was reduce the number of moving parts in a vehicle from thousands to just 35, 36 moving parts. So people say this is much simpler design, easier to maintain, much longer lasting, much better for the environment. And that in a nutshell is what an electric vehicle is. I had dinner with him one time, more than 20 years ago. And not that he had these electric vehicles in mind, but I've followed his trajectory and seen, how he has come up with these innovative ideas. And at their heart, like I said, is a simple idea, but one that goes ahead and changes the whole world.
Surely there would have been some very obvious challenges he must have faced in the beginning, like overheating, fire, etc., attendant to the risk of battery application.
Absolutely. First thing that I think what he was faced with was overheating. You know, these lithium-ion batteries are great for running laptops, but we know that they become really hot when you start using them. And now imagine when you use thousands of these, packed together in a small pack, and that is at the bottom of a car, and it's used to drive an entire vehicle. So obviously that was one of the first problems that he faced. And he was actually very lucky to be a startup. A startup can face life-threatening problems of this kind and find solutions and still continue to move on. I mean, if a similar kind of problem had affected a car company like a Mercedes-Benz or a Toyota, they would not have been able to innovate because of the liability issues. But in this case, Elon Musk and Tesla moved forward, and they solved the battery overheating problem by first putting a very strong plating at the bottom of the battery, and because of his connections and friendship with the defense industry, he was able to put the same kind of metal that is used in the M1 Abrams tanks to really secure the battery. Then he split it into multiple compartments. He made sure that it had fire retardant liquid that surrounded the battery. I mean, these are all innovations that every startup has to do as they move along. If you have an end goal in mind, the path is not very smooth sailing. At every step of the way, you've got to come up with a creative solution to solve some problem or the other. Then the other problem that he had was, dealing with the labor unions in Detroit for manufacturing. So these cars were not being manufactured correctly. They had, entire doors were not working properly. So he decided to shut the Detroit factory down and move manufacturing also to Silicon Valley. He acquired an old Toyota plant, Numi Motors Toyota plant, and started manufacturing these cars over there. And subsequently now, most Tesla factories are highly automated, robotic. They only require 300 or 400 people. They don't require armies of workers. But the beauty is, at every step of the way, when you face challenges, you come up with an innovative solution. And his first challenge was overheating of the lithium-ion batteries, which he solved by putting it in compartments and fire retardant liquid.
How is it that most of the big car companies now, most of the big names, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Toyota, Volkswagen, they're all coming out with an EV, with an electric vehicle, and doing very well in that segment. Initially, why did it have to be a Tesla that had to take on all the risks and deliver the experiment? What was the reason for that?
I'll tell you a little known secret in Silicon Valley. All major innovation comes from startups. And once startups have innovated, taken the risk, proven the market, solved the problem, a big company comes and acquires them. That's how 95+% of innovation occurs in the Silicon Valley. Take, for example, even Microsoft's Bing Chat. It is powered by ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the little tiny startup that came up with the large language model and the chat box. Microsoft just invested $10 billion in them and licensed their technology to use in its own search engine. So that's the way most of innovation occurs. But I want to elaborate on a point of yours. The jury is still out on whether electric vehicles are really doing very well. Because while most of the car companies have come out with electric vehicles, Ford, for example, is cutting production of its F-150 Lightning truck. 2 years ago, that same Lightning truck was launched by President Biden. It did very well initially, but sales this year of all electric vehicles are actually dwindling. And the reason for that is that most consumers have figured out, while they are more expensive and they are cheaper to operate, in the long run, the cost of operating a gasoline powered car and the convenience of a gasoline powered car is much better. And I think one company has figured out a happy medium between the two, and that is Toyota. And they have done exceedingly well with their Prius line of hybrid EV plug-ins. And the reason for this is that most Americans on a day-to-day basis do not drive more than 30 miles. So they can use the EV portion on a daily basis, come back home, plug in their electric vehicle to recharge, drive it again without having to go to a gas station. And then they can use the gasoline powered motor when they take long distance trips, because the charging infrastructure is still not fully developed, even in a country like the United States. And today, oftentimes, when I have taken my car, I have seen electric vehicles lining up, waiting at these EV stations to get, it takes sometimes a couple of hours to charge your car. So when you look at all of the alternatives, even though many of these car companies have massive projections for electric vehicles, I think in the last year, they are faltering with their productions because the demand has not really caught up with the supply, if you will.
Well, that's I mean, on the ground reality. But when projections are drawn up in India, by 2030, they're expecting that 40% of cars on the road will be EVs. Yeah. But it's for us to see what really happens.
Like I said, the market, you cannot predict what the market will do. Ultimately, it's market forces that drive the adoption of a technology or another. I mean, there are a number of competing technologies in this space. One is the hybrids, plug-in EVs. The other is hydrogen-powered cars. What is best for the environment also is not certain, because there is a cost of mining lithium, which is done in countries in Africa, which use child labor for that. There is an issue of the disposal of these lithium-ion batteries. And then finally, the big question is the time for charging. And I think if you see any sort of future improvements in technology, they will most likely come from batteries. The batteries will become more efficient, faster at charging, faster at reaching 80%. And ultimately, the costs have still to come down to match, the decades of experience that gasoline-powered cars have had.
Sabeer, how green is this revolution really? I mean, how green are these EVs?
Once again, that's also a very loaded and $1 million question. If, let's say, hypothetically, the whole world magically switches to electric vehicles tomorrow, if you critically think, if all of our sources of electric power were green, either nuclear or hydro, I'd say it makes for a greener planet. But on the other hand, if we still have coal-powered electric generating stations that we generate electricity from coal, then we're not really making the world any greener, because we're just pushing the problem somewhere else rather than burning it in our face in our own gasoline powered engines. We're just saying that it is coal powered, but the problem is somewhere else, even though we are kind of related, because it emits greenhouse gases that affect the planet as a whole, just not in our backyard. So it's not clear that they are completely green. The initial excitement of green, all the subsidies that they were given by the government, it's not clear that all of them will pan out over the long run. And finally, I mean, the costs, ultimately the consumer is very driven by costs. And cost-wise, like I said, people thought that they could save in the long run by charging all of their vehicles at home. But the initial cost of acquisition cannot justify this over the long period. Because gasoline powered cars are so much cheaper still as compared to electric powered cars.
What are the alternatives to EVs really? If we look at the future and if we want to move away from fossil fuels, then what are the alternatives? Hydrogen,
Hydrogen is a
hybrids?
very good, phenomenal alternative. The problem with hydrogen is transportation of hydrogen itself and equipping these refueling stations with hydrogen. But as an energy source, it is very clean. It leaves no this thing, and it can be produced abundantly in other places. But the problem is, it is inflammable. Its transportation is a problem. Refueling and equipping gas stations with hydrogen fuel cells and actual hydrogen is a question. I think a happy medium is what Toyota has struck. A plug-in EV. Those are phenomenal because you get the benefits of all the greenness of the car on a daily basis, and you get the convenience of a gasoline-powered car when you want to go longer distances.
I see. So a blend, a hybrid, is what you say is the ideal for the future.
Is what is winning currently. I don't know if it's the future, but currently that seems to be the most viable option.
And the other thing that is implied by your statement is that it's not so quickly that we can say bye-bye to oil companies.
Yes, that is also very true. We are dependent on gasoline, and I think gasoline-powered engines won't go away as quickly as the world thinks it will. And frankly, this year has been a bellwether year because last year has been a bellwether year. In the last quarter of 2023 was when all of these the demand for electric vehicles actually took a slight dip. And like Ford started cutting the production of its F-150 Lightning truck. The Ford Mach-E was not selling as well, even though, and even Mercedes-Benz, which has introduced its EQS line, hasn't seen as much of uptake as they had expected.
In the EV segment itself, what are the improvements, aside from what you've spoken about, battery and all that, charging time, etc.? What are the other improvements that you foresee coming up?
I think one of the biggest improvements is self-driving cars and what is known as autonomous driving vehicles. I have experienced that personally as well, and a lot of them are based on LiDAR kind of technology, and there are different levels. And Mercedes has done a fantastic job of incorporating semi-autonomous driving capability into its cars. So today when I drive on a freeway, I can set a speed on the car on cruise control and take my hands off for up to about 20-25 seconds for a cup of coffee or to send an email, and the car kind of drives itself and turns and makes sure it's safe for everyone, but it has to be in lanes on freeways. I don't think that technology has come on self-driving vehicles, although there are some companies like Waymo and others that have tried this autonomous driving within cities, like in San Francisco, in Las Vegas, and I think they've had a few incidents and accidents here and there that has caused cities to take pause before issuing full driving licenses to these companies.
So in terms of markets, would India be the most suitable market for proliferation of EVs?
I think India is a good market, but I'm not sure it's or if all of India's energy sources, electricity, electric power that India generates came from hydro or nuclear, I would say we're in the ideal market. Great. But if we are still using coal-fired plants to produce electricity, then we really haven't solved any problem other than at the surface. You cannot solve a problem at the surface. You've got to solve the problem at the engine level. You can't just take a car, paint it, and say it's a new car if it has an old engine. So we have an engine problem. And if we can fix that problem and say all of our energy comes from hydropower, or all of our energy comes from a clean source that is non-polluting like nuclear, I'd say then wholeheartedly India should switch over to EVs. But this piecemeal is not really solving the real problem.
So, EVs is a great solution to many problems. But what I understand from what you have said is that it's also an evolution. It'll evolve as we move up, as we go on in time. And for it to come and become a very mature solution, which it is not entirely right now. So thank you very much, Sabeer, for your insights into the EV revolution. And we'll wait for the next episode. Thank you, viewers. But if you have questions, then you need to download the Showreel app from the App Store or the Play Store. Ask questions. Sabeer will be very happy to answer. So will I. Thank you. And thank you, Sabeer.
Thank you very much.